Greetings and welcome to day 5 of the video course, Legacy of Trauma, the African American Experience. In today's video, we're going to look at intergenerational trauma, but in more specific, we're going to look at what I call the institutionalized generation, which is where we've gotten now. What situation that we see Black folks in currently, and how this thing is manifesting as we continue to move forward. In day 4, previously we talked about historical trauma. We talked about the transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, the Great Migration, the urbanization of Black folks. We even talked about the crack cocaine era. But in today's course, we're going to talk about right now what we see today, and we're about 3 generations into this, what we see today. And to be quite frank with you, I'm a little terrified. I'm concerned and I'm worried because we're not really looking at this thing as far as how this is impacting us right now. We know things are not correct. We know things are not where they need to be. But one thing that we don't know is how bad our situation actually is amongst each other and what we need to do to start working together to move forward. So that's what we're going to look at today in today's course. And again, I want to thank you for being on this 5-day journey. You've made it to the last day, but there's more to come. So stay tuned. All right, so here we are. Day 5, intergenerational trauma. We're going to take a specific look at the institutionalized generation. The photo here to your left is from one of Halle Berry's more popular films in the 90s, which is the film Losing Isaiah. Many people, if you're not familiar with this movie, the plot is about a struggling African-American mom who has to put her kid into foster care, and who is little Isaiah, as you can see there, who ends up being taken care of by a white woman, and the struggles the mom has attempting to get her son back, and just the parallel. This is a pretty popular film in the 90s. But one of the things that this film did that I don't think people really realize was really give a snapshot to what we've seen happen in our community as far as having Black children and just Black people have this influx of institution into their lives to take care of them. This film highlights the notion that Black women are not good mothers and that a Black child is in better hands of a white woman or a white family. Whether that is true or not, that is for other folks to decide, but it's something for us to think about. Because I know it's a pain point for us to even consider that Black children are in better hands with white folks than they are with their own people. But this is what this movie pretty much highlighted. And in the movie, Halle Berry is a crack addicted mom, and I forgot the profession that the white lady was a part of, but she was a better provider. She was in a better position to provide for this child. You just see the struggle of Halle Berry to maintain her level of parentalness in the movie, where Jessica Lange is taking her child away. So very heartbreaking type of movie, but it was definitely a reality check for many of us, because I don't think we understood at that time what this movie was conveying and sharing with us at the time. And what I call that is the institutionalized generation, which you see here on the screen between 1985 until now. And this is important work for me. This is my seminal work, because I'm a product of this. I was born right smack dab in the middle of this. And I've lived this. And now that I'm in a different position in life, I see this on a consistent basis, and it does terrify me. It does concern me greatly. But what this is we have had several generations. I have concluded that we are in our 3rd generation now of this institutionalized generation that was developed after the crack era, really developed during the crack era, but manifested even more after the crack era, where you have people who were born in the mid-'80s to the present. And what has happened is these 3 generations have had an enrichment of service providers external to their family members. So literally, the institutions have become substitutes of the actual community. Before, we would have, grandma's house, and your aunties play like social workers, and your dads and your uncles and your grandfathers and your older cousins will be like coaches for you and help steer you in the right direction, and the mentors. And all that has shifted due to the struggles that our community has gone through the historical trauma and the intergenerational trauma to what we have now. But what has been created is this inferiority and dependency culture, which is very dangerous. We have an inferiority complex already due to being in an anti-Black society. But when you have to go to your local county or your local nonprofit agency to get your basic needs met, what does that say to you? What message does that convey to you as a young person? As you develop and you don't see your own people taking care of you, but you see a red shield, or you see, the hand logos. A lot of these nonprofits have hand logos, and these are the people who are feeding and housing and clothing you, not necessarily your parents directly, right? And we have, and this isn't every Black person, but we have enough of us that it's a significant problem that we don't understand. So elements of internalized oppression and extreme levels of helplessness end up being developed with this. The next clip I'm going to show you are just some of the things that I end up seeing. So individuals born in the mid-'80s during the crack era, these generations have been enriched with service providers external to family members. Further, in inferiority and dependency mentality, these individuals have developed tendencies that do not allow them to maintain self-sufficiency, accountability, and responsibilities for oneself or family. We see this all over. A lot of people have lost that agency, that Black agency, that ability to take care of yourself and your family has been taken over by someone else. And this has been, evidenced by and confirmed by multiple instances that I've had as a professional, as a mental health professional. These are literally quotes that I've had from clients and things that I've heard, I've heard not just one time, more than one time here on the right side. So these are just some thoughts and concepts that come to mind. So I'm going to go through these quotes and talk a little bit about them because they're very important to understand. I've heard this more than one occasion from many different clients that I've had, where I will have my social worker get me a job. Now, your social worker, and we have good social workers in these fields where they'll set up the job, they'll talk to the manager, they'll get your interview set up, they'll give them the background on you, everything. They'll give you everything you need. All you got to do is show up and you got the job. And a lot of times we don't even show up to that, right? But it's this notion that it's not your job, it's not your duty to get that job, that employment for yourself. Your social worker will handle that for you. Just giving up all agency to do things for yourself, right? This next quote is from a mother. I was seeing her son. He was in the 8th grade, and their session was right after conferences. So they went to conferences and met me around like 6 p.m. after the conferences. And the mom came into the session hot. She was just upset. And she said this to me, and I was just like, wow, I don't think this is the right thing. And she said, the teacher's supposed to teach my child to read. She was very frustrated at what was going on at school. Her son was not at reading level. But one thing that she failed to realize is that's not the teacher's responsibility to teach your child how to read, especially once your child has hit the 8th grade. This is a 13-year-old young man. He should have learned how to read, 8 to 10 years ago in his life. And one of the things that end up happening is we've given away so much of our own parental power, so much of our own individual power to institutions that we expect schools to teach our children their history and the basic skills, like just basic math skills and reading skills, when that is on us as parents and on us as community members to make sure that our children are literate. That is not the teacher's job. And we know that these educational institutions are not the best for our kids in the first place. We cannot give over our power to make sure that our children are taken care of to others. When we do that, we end up in bad situations. This is what happened. So now you have a 13-year-old Black boy who has the reading level of a 2nd or 3rd grader, and you have a frustrated mom who believes that her teacher is supposed to teach the child how to read. The teacher is not responsible for the education of your child. The teacher is responsible for facilitating that child's learning. But at the end of the day, those basic skills is on us as a community and on us as parents to make sure that our children are prepared. Same thing that if your child didn't know how to tie their shoe, that is not the school's responsibility. That is your responsibility. That is the community's responsibility to make sure the child can tie their shoe. But this is what happens when we have had institutions involved in our lives so much. We literally externalize our power onto institutions. This next quote is from one of my older clients. This guy was way older than me. He probably could have been my, pretty much my grandfather at the time that I was working with him, but I was conducting groups, and it was a men's group. And these was for guys who, it was a recidivism group. So guys coming out of prison, it was a group to help them not go back in. But one day during our group, one of the older guys had made this statement that kind of blew my mind. And this is, you could definitely tell by the statement, it's an older dude too. So he said, at least in jail, I get 3 hots and a cot. Now, you know, he's older and he's been in and out of jail, because nowadays they don't even give you 3 hots anymore. You'd be lucky if you get 1 hot meal in jail. I don't know if people realize that or not, but that's the truth. But what is he actually saying here? What he's saying is, at least in jail, I am fed and I am housed. Think about what that means as a person, that you've been so institutionalized that if you do go to jail, it doesn't bother you, because at least I can eat and at least I have a place to rest my head at night. That is the essence of institutionalized mentality. That is the essence of institutionalized generation, where we've literally given away all our agency to the point where we've been beaten down so much that we'll allow prison to be a sanctuary for us, prison or jail to be a place for us where at least we get our basic needs taken care of, which is just troubling to even hear. This next one, I'm just happy I woke up this morning. I hear this all the time from Black folks. And unfortunately, if you don't have a chronic illness, waking up in the morning should be a given. It shouldn't be something that you're just fortunate with. You know what I mean? If you don't have a chronic illness. But as a clinician, what I hear when I hear someone say, I'm just happy I woke up this morning, I hear that is a trigger for me of depression, because you've been beaten up so down. You're so tired. You just been ran through the mill of life so much that just waking up is just the blessing that you have of the day. Not your purpose, not what you're doing, not what you're giving, just waking up, which should be a given unless you are chronically ill. Should be a given to wake up. But we have been beaten down so much as people that, I'm just happy I woke up this morning as our bare minimum. Just waking up out of our sleep is our bare minimum to life, which is another element of this institutionalized generation. This next quote is something that I am sick of hearing. I hear it every day, especially from the young people that I work with, is I don't know. Now, it used to be when people told you, I don't know, they would just tell you that, especially young people, because they didn't want to work with you. They didn't want to tell you nothing. But the sad part is many people really don't know. We have a information gap in our community where we just don't have information things. We have access. The internet has made it very easy. A lot of our communities have libraries that we can access for free, but we don't have the information for whatever reason. There's just a lot of not knowing things. I'm pretty sure in this 5-day video course, I've shared some things with you that we have not known that you could probably have Googled or read in a book yourself. But we just don't have a lot of information for many different reasons. It's not just the fact that we're lazy and shiftless and we don't want the information. No, it's the fact that sometimes we don't even know where to start to get the information, right? Because we have given up our ability to educate ourselves and just allowed it to be something that the schools do. Think about how people utilize YouTube. Most people don't utilize it as studying. Most people utilize it as entertainment, where it can be utilized for both plus some things. Right? You can learn a lot of skills, a lot of ways to deal with your mental health. You can learn how to cook, work on your car. You can learn how to date. You can learn how to do a lot of things on YouTube. YouTube should pretty much give you a degree. After you watch a certain amount of hours on YouTube, they should email you or mail you an actual degree, because there's so many things you can learn in there. But we don't utilize it that way. We utilize it as entertainment first, and mainly entertainment. So I don't know is something that has happened in result to externalizing our power unto other people to provide us with the information that they want us to know, instead of seeking out the information that we should know for ourselves. And the last quote that I'm going to talk about here that I always get in trouble for is, I'm going to let go and let God handle it. This is not an attack on anyone's spiritual position, but this is something that, again, thinking with my clinical ears, I feel like when I hear this, people are defeated. I feel like when I hear this, people are allowing a higher power to dictate and determine what happens in their lives next, instead of taking action themselves. One thing we have to keep in mind is that our spiritual guidance, our higher power, is in the fight with us. They've given us the tools we need to handle what we need to handle, but they're not handling it for you. Okay, you get presented with opportunities, you get presented with skills and tools, but it's up to you to do the work. And we can't just allow our spiritualness to carry us. We can't just allow our higher power to do all the work for us. We have to do something, because when you just let go and let God handle it, things get tough. And I've seen it time and time again from people who just want to let go and let God and not actually do anything for themselves, and they end up in worse situations than they have been previously. Again, not attack on anyone's spiritual understanding or position, but something to consider when we are doing this work. You cannot just let go and let God. God is there with you. Whoever your God may be, or whatever your God may be, it is with you. But you have to do some work as well. And I stress that because I see that a lot in our community. And it's scary sometimes because people mean well when they say that, but what ends up happening is nothing really changes for them. This next thing you may have seen before, this is Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. Psychological concept from Abraham Maslow. And Abraham Maslow, he's really the catalyst for what we look at in personal development. He was one of the first people who kind of put these concepts together, and people still utilize a lot of his work when we talk about personal development. But I'm bringing this to you right now for you to look at those. Let me go through it. I'll start from the bottom and work my way up the pyramid. So Abraham Maslow's theory is everyone is seeking self-actualization. However, to be a self-actualized person, one must have stability in these other areas on the pyramid. So the bottom area of the pyramid, we have physiological needs. So you have breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, and excursion. We have safety needs. So security of our bodies, security of our employment, security of our resources, mortality, our families, our health, our property. So making sure that things are secure. Then we have love and belonging. So that's our friendships, our family, our sexual intimacy. These are things that we need to feel like we're getting to that level of self-actualization. Then the next level is esteem. So we have self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, and being respected by others. And then ultimately that leads to self-actualization, which is mortality. I can't even speak. Creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, and acceptance of facts. And what the concept is, if you are stable at each one of these levels, you reach this level of self-actualization, which is like your highest self. You are functioning and on all cylinders when you are a self-actualized person. One of my goals as a therapist, as someone who does this work, is to get people to feel like they are self-actualized, to get people to that level of self-actualization, because that's when the community changes. That's when you change. That's when the healing takes place. The healing takes place in the level of self-actualization, but you cannot heal if you don't reach that level due to all these other things that are in the way. Now, I bring this to you so you can focus on the bottom two areas, safety and your physiological needs. Unfortunately, in our community, Black folks have had institutions that have been responsible for our safety and our physiological needs for I would say the last 40 to 50 years. We're approaching 50. And those institutions have been responsible for these things. So when we talk about welfare, WIC, Section 8, that's the base level right there, right? We talk about safety and security, we don't monitor, we don't police our own communities. Our communities are policed by others. We talk about the safety of employment. We don't secure our own levels of employment. Sometimes a nonprofit agency is doing that, or some kind of work program that's put together, but we don't have that element of business and that element to keep our resources in-house. We really struggle with these areas. And these bottom two areas are important, because if those bottom two areas are being controlled and manifested by institutions that we do not control, how do we ever get to the level of self-actualization as people, as a collective, not just on the individual level? Individuals will from time to time spring on up. But collectively, how do we self-actualize as people when we have institutions that are responsible for just our base needs? This is very important for us to understand. If we do not dictate what happens with our base needs, how do we dictate what happens with our future? Something for us to keep in mind as we move forward. What you're seeing here is this cycle, the power and economics cycle. This comes from the World Trust. They have a great film called Cracking the Code. Highly suggest people check that out. And it talks about this cycle of inequities that gets started. And it talks about it from an internal and external base. So internally, we have biases, privileges, and institutionalized racism. And externally, we have interpersonal, institutional, and structural pieces that are at play. And these things intertwine in a power and economic base. And it's informed by our history, our cultures, and our identity. And these things turn out in equities, right? So we talk about Black folks struggling. These are the things that are at play while we struggle. And if we don't understand how these institutionalized things are at play and impact us, how our historical trauma impacts us, how our culture and that adaptation to that historical intergenerational trauma impact us, and how those things impact how we identify as a people, we are going to continue to be stuck. And we are going to continue to be dictated by these institutions that we do not control. And when that happens, what happens to the generations ahead of us? We have no control over them, which many people believe right now. We have no control over our younger generation. They just do what the music says, right? They follow all these people on Love and Hip Hop. And the media controls our kids. You know, we have one section where the media controls our kids. We have another section where the streets control our kids. We have another section where these institutions control our kids. But we as a community don't control our own children. We have to think about this and be honest about it. How is this impacting us? This institutionalized generation thing is big, and it's not. I don't want to say it's beyond trauma. I almost said it's beyond trauma, but the trauma is a part of it. But the other part of it is our inability to understand and our inability to act on it. Okay? African-American citizenship is something that we are fighting for still to this day. And I forgot to update my slide, but we are at 400 years. So we can really say it's 1619 to 2019. We have the chattel slavery, which lasted 246 years. We had Jim Crow ism, as I like to call it, and segregation, which lasted 100 years, right? Now we're just talking about citizens' rights, which has been in the last 54 years, and the struggle for full inclusion. We are also at a point where we're being assimilated into this American culture, which is a whole nother e-course that we're going to talk about, home study course for you. We're going to get into that as well. The assimilation of the Negro, to the African American, to the Black, to the American. We've been going through this. We've been fighting this process for so long to get to this point. This is the intergenerational trauma that we've experienced. Black man, Black woman, and Black child have experienced this. We have gone through strife and turmoil just to get to the point where we are now. It's a miracle that Black people are even still here. There have been ethnic groups who are no longer on this planet that have gone through way less than we've gone through, but we are still here through this strife and turmoil. We have collective genius. We have a culture that will not fold, that unfortunately has adapted this idea of struggle. And since we've adapted this idea of struggle, I think that we're stuck there. We haven't adapted an idea of evolution and being beyond the struggle. We expect the struggle and nothing else. And I think that hurts us, even though it's kept us alive for so long, it hurts us in the long run. This is what we've been dealing with. It's really 400 years of struggling that we've been dealing with. And it's time for us to understand this and move beyond it, because in order for us to survive moving forward, we're going to have to definitely make some changes. What are we seeing now? We're seeing the new Jim Crow, high numbers of mass incarceration, both males and females. Orange is the new black, anyone? We're starting to get you comfortable with seeing those women in prison and the expectation for them to be in prison. We see no help, help not needed. We used to have help needed signs posted around when people were protesting back in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. And now we have high levels of unemployment all around the country. Black people don't have any jobs, struggling. We have what I call ADHD, damn. High numbers of black children being overly diagnosed with ADHD and ODD. For people who don't know what ODD, that's oppositional defiant disorder, which is when kids have problems with authority, they get a mental health label that is known as ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. And a lot of our kids end up having this due to their behavioral issues in school. They'll get a mental health diagnosis of ODD. ADHD. Now, that doesn't mean our kids don't have ADHD or ODD. I believe some of our kids do, but what ends up happening is when you just give this to every kid without proper assessment, then it looks like, it becomes an institutionalized process and a racist process at that. And then also it introduces a lot of kids to medications that don't necessarily need them. Some of our kids need meds, but there's a lot of them who don't. They just need proper environments and proper diets and proper treatments outside of medications. But it's very easy to just give you a prescription than to think of some structural things that might help improve the behavior. You know, one thing that I think about a lot is Amish kids don't have ADHD. I don't think anybody ever thinks of that, but Amish kids, they don't have ADHD. Why? They have a cultural structure that doesn't allow it. Those kids are developed into a paradigm that is very different than ours. And they don't have ADHD in Amish communities. But we don't think about that. All right. Throwaway children. This is not my term. This is an academic term. Yes, academics use this term, throwaway children. Throwaway children are high levels of children who are in foster care, adoption, and transitional housing. All right. We have tons of these kids. A lot of these kids are black. A lot of these are black kids who are quote unquote throwaway kids, kids who are not home, which leads to the last point that I'm talking about here is fragile family dynamics. Everybody is somewhere other than home. Everybody is somewhere other than home. We have family members all over the place. We have some of the, part of our genius is our ability to develop community when there isn't any, but also we shouldn't have to always do that. That's one of the parts of it that we don't think about is we have developed community when there isn't any, but now we have family dynamics where we might have someone who's claiming someone as a child, but they're the ex-girlfriend of the biological dad. They're not even no blood relation to the kid or to the kids, but they're playing mommy. Like stuff like that gets very tricky. And we've had grandmothers step up to the plate and take care of kids, but guess what? These grandmothers, the grandmothers of old are getting older and can't keep up with these kids anymore, and the grandmothers of young are too young to take care of these kids. Right now in our community, we have grandmothers who are in their 30s, mid to late 30s. We have things that we need to work on in our community, not talking bad about us, but just talking reality about us. We have a lot of ways to go. Where do we find ourselves? We find ourselves in what we call survival stress management. We have all these issues that go on in the Black community, all these issues that we deal with, and we're literally in survival stress management. And what survival stress management is a process of adapting to stressful situations by acting or reacting without thinking of consequences of our choices, immediate satisfaction, or instant self-gratification resulting increased stress and or depression. Okay, this is survival stress management. As Black people, we have just been surviving. Literally, one thing that we know about trauma is about the moment. We will do what we need to do in the moment to make sure that our trauma response gets taken care of. We're not thinking about the future. We're not thinking about our legacies. We're just trying to move forward. And that is survival stress management. We see things like judgmental and distorted thoughts and feelings, impatience, exploitation, aggression, abusive and violent, directed against oneself and to others. These are some responses from survival stress management. We also see addictive substances and behaviors. things like drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping. Hear about retail therapy, we just shop through it, right? Fast money, that addiction to fast money, gotta hustle, gotta get it. Gambling, food, video games. These are all responses that we have to our stressors, right? And these things produce a limited sense of relief, and they require repetition. So we need to keep doing these things to feel good. But these things don't solve our problems for us. They just give us temporary relief. This is the essence of survival stress management. We have developed culture around survival stress management. And unfortunately, what this leads to is a loss of narrative of resiliency. Our narrative of resiliency has been lost. We don't even know how we got into this point. As I stated before, it is a miracle that Black folks are still exist in this society. African American Negroes even exist in the society, but we can't even tell you how we got here because it's even too painful to talk about. One thing we have to realize is that Black people, African American, Negroes are GMO. All right, that's what I call us GMO Negroes. We are a creation, just like some of these crops and things. We have been genetically modified to be who we are and how we are today. We have a little bit of our culture from the homeland, mixed in with other cultures from the homeland, mixed in with the slave culture, mixed into after slavery as we try to develop a new identity. And all of this has been facilitated by other people to the point now where we are here in this institutionalized generation, and it's being facilitated not by us, by media and other institutions on who and how we should be. And this is dangerous, and we have to keep it in mind that we need to do something different. We've lost our narrative of resiliency. We are a resilient people. We are. And we can go even further than we're at now. And we have great thinkers, and we've produced tons of things to not only this country, but to the world. And without us, this world does not spin the way that it spins. But if we don't take a sense into that, if we don't take an ownership and some agency into that, what are we doing? We are stuck in survival stress management collectively. We have the ability to do what we need to do. We just don't know how to do it. We're not organized. We don't take enough of our own influence to push it forward for ourselves collectively. And there's just a lot of work to be done. We have to deal with our trauma. But we lose this narrative of resiliency because we've done great things. And we don't need just a Black History Month. We need to understand that we need to live our history and be proud of ourselves every day. Those things are great for us to be there, but we need to make sure that we're living our personal histories, something that we don't talk about enough, and our collective histories, because at the end of the day, we have genius in our community, we have greatness in our community, and we can continue to have these things if we push forward together, but we have to deal with the trauma in order to do that. In the previous days, I think it was day 2, I talked about ACEs. This is what the ACE pyramid looks like to me. As you remember before, it started off with the average child experiences, but when it comes to Black folks, it starts off with the intergenerational and historical trauma. It leads to the social conditioning and local context. Then we get into the adverse childhood experiences. There's a reason why I linearly put this together. So you get the brain science and what we know as trauma in these industries now to how we got here, how we got to that point. Then from that complex trauma, that continuous trauma that happens over and over, not post-traumatic stress disorder, but that complex trauma because it doesn't go anywhere. Then it leads to a disrupted neurodevelopment. Then it leads to social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. Then it leads to our coping skills. How do we adapt health first behaviors? Then it leads to disease, disability, and social problems. And ultimately, it can lead to early death. From conception to death, this is our cycle. And then guess what? If there's not proper intervention, the ACEs and the historical trauma is passed down to the next generation to start the whole cycle all over again. This is what we see in our community. This is what we see with Black folks. That historical trauma, that intergenerational trauma going from one generation to the next. You have the power to break the cycle in your family. You have the power to break the cycle so your lineage can do something different and they don't have to continue to pass on the pain. The pain may be there, but how we respond to it can be different. And that's why I do this work. so that we don't have to continue to pass on the pain to the next generation. It is my duty to make sure that the generations behind me have a better opportunity than I did, that my children have a better opportunity than I did. And that's why I do this work. And that's why I encourage you to continue to follow this work. Because without this, what do we have moving forward? You know, we have a notion in our community that time heals all wounds. And I believe actions heal wounds. You know, we can't just let time, figure this thing out for us, because time does not guarantee that things will get better, because things can also regress in time. And I think that we don't often think about that. Things don't automatically get better. They can get worse without proper action and attention. A few things that trauma impacts our social and emotional intelligence. It's something I talk a lot about, and I have courses for you to absolutely understand more about how we infuse our own social and emotional intelligence to get better. Trauma affects what we hear. It affects our hearing. We might miss what people are actually trying to say to us. We misinterpret things. Our communication gets all messed up, right? Communication is affected by trauma. We might be too assertive or not assertive enough in situations, unfortunately. It affects our ability to take risk. Think about to yourself how many times you've said it or how many times you've heard other people say, I ain't gonna do that. I ain't gonna do that. We don't do that. We don't do this. We are scared to take risks because of our trauma. Even if the risk has the ability to help us and to make us do something better, we are less likely to take that opportunity because of our trauma. Keeps us what? It keeps us in our comfort zone. We will stay in our comfort zone even if our comfort zone is not beneficial to us. If our comfort zone is harmful and toxic, we will stay there because that's what we know. It's like a bed. We know it, we stick with it, we stay with it. There's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And unfortunately, as Black folks, we have to learn how to be uncomfortable. We've learned how to be uncomfortable socially and accept it, but we haven't learned how to be uncomfortable for our own benefit, to evolve. We are at a point of evolution. I am here to assist with this as much as I can. And I'm going to finally leave you with this last quote from James Baldwin. People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. And in order to understand the institutionalized generation, in order to understand the intergenerational trauma and historical trauma, in order to understand the Black person today, you have to understand all these things together. Black people did not get to the point where we are today by accident. There were several things at play that led us to where we are today. And we need to be intentional in changing that moving forward. Otherwise, I don't know what is at the end for us. But I do know we have everything we need to make the shift. I would encourage you to continue the conversations with myself, stay connected with me and other people, ask questions if you have them. Again, I am Brandon Jones, psychotherapist, professor, and author. This is the 5-day video course. This is the end of the 5-day video course, Legacy of Trauma. And this is only the tip of the iceberg for other content that I have. I would encourage you to see some of my other home study courses and video courses. We're definitely going to get into a lot of this understanding and more to not only just help you as an individual, but also help the community. So, peace and power to you all, and I'll see you next time.